Mike Williams. Jerry Michael Williams, born October 16, 1969, grew up in Bradfordville, Florida. He graduated from North Florida Christian High School and Florida State University and worked as a real estate appraiser, earning roughly $200,000 per year. He married his high school sweetheart, Denise Merrill, on December 16, 1994. Their daughter Ansley was born May 8, 1999. Mike was an experienced duck hunter known for meticulous safety habits. Denise Williams was a CPA and homecoming queen. Brian Winchester, born October 27, 1970, was Mike's best friend since childhood and worked as an insurance agent. All four of them, Mike, Denise, Brian, and Brian's first wife, Kathy Thomas, attended North Florida Christian together and socialized as couples. In 1997, Denise and Brian began a secret affair that would lead to conspiracy. On the morning of December 16, 2000, his 6th wedding anniversary, Mike left to go duck hunting on Lake Seminole. He never returned. Brian Winchester later confessed that he met Mike at a gas station, followed him to the lake, pushed him overboard, expecting his waders to pull him under. And then, when Mike clung to a tree stump fighting to survive, shot him in the face with a shotgun. Winchester buried the body 9 feet deep in mud near Carr Lake, approximately 60 miles from the lake, then attended a family Christmas party that evening as if nothing had happened. He sat with Mike's family, ate dinner, exchanged pleasantries. The next day, he joined the search party looking for Mike. He helped look for the man he had just killed. He walked the shoreline with Mike's mother, pretending to hope they would find him alive. Authorities theorized Mike had drowned and been consumed by alligators, despite the fact that alligators do not feed in cold winter months when water temperatures were 46 to 58 degrees. Any wildlife expert could have told them that. A judge declared Mike legally dead in just 6 months, far below the normal 5-year waiting period. Denise collected approximately $1.75 million in life insurance, including a $1 million policy Brian himself had sold to Mike just months before his disappearance. The man who sold the policy killed the policy holder and then married the beneficiary. All 3 of them had been friends since high school. How does a best friend sell you a life insurance policy, then use it to fund the life he builds with your wife? Brian and Denise married on December 3, 2005. Moved into the same house she had shared with Mike and raised Ansley together. They slept in the same bedroom. They used the same furniture. They lived Mike's life as if he had never existed. The cover-up lasted nearly 17 years. Denise had told Brian she would rather be a widow than a divorcee because her family frowned on divorce for religious reasons. She chose to have her husband killed rather than file for divorce. Mike's mother, Cheryl Williams, never stopped fighting. She wrote over 2,600 letters to the Florida governor and ran her own investigation for years. She never believed the alligator theory. She told anyone who would listen that her son did not simply vanish into a lake. FDLE reopened the case in 2004, but found insufficient evidence. The breakthrough came on August 5, 2016, when Brian kidnapped Denise at gunpoint during their divorce proceedings, apparently fearing she would reveal the truth. Police found bleach, tarps, and sheets in his vehicle. After his arrest, Brian's ex-wife, Kathy Thomas, became an FDLE confidential informant, recording phone calls with Denise that captured incriminating statements. In October 2017, Winchester accepted an immunity deal. Full immunity from the killing in exchange for his confession, testimony against Denise, and leading investigators to Mike's remains. After 5 days of excavation, Mike's body was found on October 18th, 2017, still intact, still wearing gloves and his wedding ring. 17 years in the mud, and the ring was still on his finger. Denise Williams was arrested on May 8, 2018, her daughter's 19th birthday. She was found guilty of first-degree conspiracy and accessory after the fact. On appeal, the murder conviction was overturned in November 2020. She was resentenced to 30 years. In September 2021, Brian Winchester is serving 20 years for kidnapping. Remarkably, because Winchester received immunity and Denise's murder conviction was overturned, no one has been formally convicted of the actual killing of Mike Williams. A Hulu docuseries, Mr. and Mrs. Murder, premiered in July 2025. But the next case involves a conspiracy even more elaborate, one that stretched from a wealthy South Florida dental practice all the way down to a gang member willing to pull the trigger for cash. Dan Markel. Dan Markel, born October 9, 1972, in Montreal, was a Harvard-educated law professor who joined the Florida State University College of Law faculty in 2005 and earned tenure in 2010. He married Wendy Jill Adelson in February 2006. They had 2 sons born in 2009 and 2010. The Adelson family, matriarch Donna Adelson, son Charlie Adelson, a periodontist, and patriarch Harvey Adelson, were a prominent South Florida family. When Wendy filed for divorce in September 2012, a bitter custody battle ensued. A judge denied Wendy's motion to relocate the children to South Florida in June 2013. Prosecutors later concluded the Adelsons' desperate desire to move the children closer was the reason they wanted Dan gone. On July 18, 2014, at approximately 11 a.m., Markel was shot twice in the head while sitting in his car in his Tallahassee garage. He died the following day at age 41. The conspiracy ran through an elaborate chain that stretched from a wealthy dental office in South Florida to the streets of Miami. Donna Adelson allegedly orchestrated and helped fund the plot. Charlie Adelson, through his romantic relationship with Catherine Magbanua, connected the wealthy family to the criminal world. Magbanua was the mother of 2 children with Sigfredo Garcia, a Latin Kings gang member, who recruited his childhood friend Luis Rivera to help carry out the hit. A dentist's family paid a gang member to kill a law professor over a custody dispute. The payment flowed as disguised checks from the Adelson dental practice to Magbanua, signed by Donna, who then distributed approximately $100,000 in cash to the triggerman and driver. The checks were disguised as payments for dental work that was never performed. Garcia and Rivera made a scouting trip to Tallahassee in June 2014, then returned July 15th through 18th. They rented a silver Toyota Prius, the least conspicuous car imaginable. They surveilled Markel's routine for days, learning when he dropped his sons at preschool, which route he took home, what time he arrived. Then Garcia followed him home from the preschool and shot him in his own garage. Surveillance cameras, SunPass toll records, cell tower data, and a rental car agreement formed the evidence trail linking the killers back to Miami. The Prius was captured on camera at every toll booth between Miami and Tallahassee. In April 2016, an undercover FBI agent approached Donna outside her Miami condo, posing as a blackmailer claiming to have evidence connecting her to the murder. Her first call was to Charlie. Their secretly recorded conversation proved pivotal. Donna said, "You probably have a general idea what I'm talking about." On November 13th, 2023, just 1 week after Charlie's conviction, Donna was arrested at Miami International Airport while attempting to board a one-way flight to Vietnam, a country with no U.S. extradition treaty. She and Harvey had obtained rushed visas. 1 week after watching her son get convicted, she tried to flee the country. How do you plan a getaway to a country with no extradition treaty and still get caught at the gate? Donna's own eldest son, Robert Adelson, testified against her at her 2025 trial, recounting a phone call after the murder where Donna described details only the person responsible could know. She said someone went to the front door and said, "Are you Dan Markel?" and then shot him. Her own son sat on the witness stand and repeated those words back to a courtroom. Luis Rivera pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and received 19 years. Sigfredo Garcia was found guilty in October 2019 and sentenced to life without parole. Catherine Magbanua was found guilty at retrial in May 2022 and sentenced to life without parole. Charlie Adelson was found guilty in November 2023 and sentenced to life. Donna Adelson was found guilty in September 2025 and sentenced to life without parole. Wendy Adelson remains an unindicted co-conspirator. As of early 2026, no charges have been filed against Wendy or Harvey. But the next case does not involve a chain of hired criminals. It involves a clown suit, a basket of flowers, and a doorbell. Marlene Warren. Marlene May Warren, 40 years old, was a successful businesswoman who owned approximately 17 rental properties, co-owned Bargain Motors, a used car lot, an airplane, and a racehorse. She was not someone who needed anyone. She had built her own wealth. She lived with her husband Michael Warren in the exclusive Aero Club community in Wellington, Florida, a gated neighborhood near the Palm Beach County Airport, where some residents kept private planes. Michael ran Bargain Motors and was having an affair with employee Sheila Keene, a repossession agent. Keene was tough, physical, and fearless. Neighbors at Keene's apartment building believed she and Michael were already husband and wife. Employees at Bargain Motors reported seeing them together constantly. On the morning of May 26, 1990, Memorial Day weekend, a white Chrysler LeBaron pulled into Marlene's circular driveway. A person dressed as a clown, orange wig, red nose, white face paint, full costume, carried a basket of flowers and 2 balloons to the front door. It looked festive. It looked like a delivery. Marlene's stepson, Joe Aarons, was standing nearby and saw the whole thing. Marlene happily opened the door. Her last words were, "How pretty." The clown then shot her in the face at point-blank range with a .38 or .357 caliber weapon, calmly walked back to the car, and drove away. No rush, no panic. Just a clown walking back to a car after shooting a woman in her own doorway. Marlene died 2 days later at the hospital. The getaway car had been stolen from a rental company near Bargain Motors. An employee named Claude Poitre told investigators he had driven Michael and Sheila to the rental lot and watched them drive the LeBaron away 45 days before the killing. A costume shop employee identified Keene as the woman who purchased a clown outfit 2 nights before the shooting. Orange fibers found in Keene's apartment matched those in the getaway car. The evidence pointed straight at her, but it was not enough. Despite strong circumstantial evidence, 1990-era DNA technology could not definitively connect hair from the car to Keene. The gun and costume were never recovered. Eyewitnesses initially described a 6-foot-tall man, complicating the case against the 5'10" Keene. Michael was convicted on 43 counts of racketeering and fraud in 1994, crimes discovered during the murder investigation, and served approximately 3 to 4 years. After prison, he vanished. Then in 2002, he resurfaced to marry Sheila Keene at the Little White Chapel in Las Vegas. The prime suspect in his wife's murder became his second wife. They moved to Virginia, then Tennessee, and co-owned a restaurant called the Purple Cow in Kingsport, Tennessee. They lived as a quiet, unremarkable couple for 15 years. The man whose wife was killed by someone dressed as a clown married the prime suspect 12 years later. And they opened a restaurant together. In 2013, prosecutor Reed Scott ordered new DNA testing using mitochondrial DNA analysis. The technology that did not exist in 1990 had finally caught up. Results connected the car hair to Keene. On September 26, 2017, Sheila Keene Warren was arrested at her Virginia home 27 years after the shooting. 27 years she had been free. One of her first statements to police was, "Well, are you going to arrest him too?" She was talking about Michael. After spending over 5 years in solitary confinement awaiting trial, with key witnesses dying and evidence deteriorating over nearly 3 decades, Keene Warren accepted a plea deal on April 25, 2023, pleading guilty to second-degree murder with a 12-year sentence. Due to credit for over 5 years already served in county jail and gained time under pre-1995 Florida law, she was released on November 2nd, 2024, after serving only about 18 months in actual state prison time. 18 months for dressing as a clown and shooting a woman in the face. She reportedly returned to live with Michael Warren. He was never charged. They are together. The case is legally closed with no pending appeals. But the next case became the most watched trial in American history, and the verdict left 40 million people in disbelief. Caylee Anthony. Caylee Marie Anthony was born August 9, 2005, in Orlando, Florida. She lived with her mother, Casey Anthony, born March 19, 1986, and maternal grandparents, George and Cindy Anthony. Casey was a 22-year-old single mother with a documented pattern of compulsive lying. She had fabricated having a job at Universal Studios for nearly 3 years. Caylee was last seen alive on June 16, 2008. For the next 31 days, Casey did not report her missing. 31 days. Instead, she stayed with her boyfriend, Tony Lazzaro, went to clubs, entered a hot body contest at a nightclub, and on July 3, 2008, got a tattoo reading Bella Vita, Italian for beautiful life. She told her family Caylee was with a babysitter named Zanny the Nanny, a person who did not exist. When her mother asked to speak with Caylee on the phone, Casey always had an excuse. She lied about everything: where she worked, where she lived, where her daughter was. For 31 days, she acted as if nothing had happened. On July 15, 2008, George Anthony retrieved Casey's impounded car from a tow yard. The car had been sitting there for weeks. Both he and the manager noticed a strong smell from the trunk that they immediately recognized. That evening, Cindy confronted Casey and made 3 911 calls, telling the dispatcher it smelled like there had been a dead body in the car. Casey led detectives into the Universal Studios building where she claimed to work. She walked them down hallways, through corridors, deeper into the building, before finally admitting in a dead-end hallway that she had not worked there in years. She had been lying about having a job for nearly 3 years. Cadaver dogs alerted to decomposition in the car trunk in the Anthony's backyard. On December 11, 2008, Utility worker Roy Kronk discovered Kaylee's skeletal remains in a wooded area less than half a mile from the family home, wrapped in a blanket inside a laundry bag with duct tape around the skull. Less than half a mile. She had been there the entire time, steps from the house where everyone was looking for her. A critical piece of evidence was missed by investigators until after the trial. At 2:51 p.m. on June 16, 2008, the day Kaylee was last seen, someone using Casey's password-protected account searched Google for foolproof suffocation on the Firefox browser. Investigators had only examined Internet Explorer, missing this search entirely. The most important digital evidence in the entire case sat on a browser that nobody thought to check. By the time it was discovered, the trial was already over. The trial ran May 24th through July 5th, 2011, and became the most watched criminal proceeding since the O.J. Simpson case. Prosecutor Linda Drain Burdick argued Casey chloroformed and suffocated Kaylee to free herself from the responsibilities of motherhood. Defense attorney Jose Baez presented a dramatically different theory. He countered that Kaylee drowned accidentally in the family pool on June 16th and that George Anthony helped cover it up. He also alleged that Casey's compulsive lying stemmed from childhood mistreatment by her father. After 10 hours and 40 minutes of deliberation, the jury found Casey not guilty of murder, aggravated child abuse, and aggravated manslaughter. She was convicted only of 4 misdemeanor counts of lying to police. An estimated 40 million Americans watched the verdict live. The courtroom gasped. Legal analysts were stunned. Even trial judge Belvin Perry later said he was shocked by the outcome. The prosecution's case was entirely circumstantial. The cause, manner, and precise time of death were never established. And without a cause of death, the jury could not convict. Casey was released from jail on July 17, 2011, having served nearly 3 years of time-served credit. She declared bankruptcy in 2013, listing about $792,000 in liabilities. She moved to Tennessee in 2024. On March 1st, 2025, she posted her first TikTok video calling herself a legal advocate, promoting a Substack newsletter. She filed paperwork to launch Case Research and Consulting Services, LLC, a private investigative firm. She appeared in a 2022 Peacock docuseries. She has never had another child and does not speak to her father, George, whom she continues to accuse of mistreatment. George and Cindy remain married and living in Florida. She cannot be retried for Kaylee's death. But the next case involves a man so obsessed with controlling his ex-wife that he hired a chain of people across state lines to make sure she never moved on. Sheila Bellush. Sheila Bellush, born October 19, 1962, married Alan Blackthorne, born Alan Van Hout in 1983. They had 2 daughters, Stevie and Daryl. The marriage was marked by severe domestic harm. Blackthorne was convicted of assaulting Sheila in 1987. After a bitter divorce, Sheila was awarded over $1 million in settlements, which Blackthorne avoided paying by filing for bankruptcy. He was furious, not because he lost his wife, but because he lost control of her. Sheila remarried Jamie Bellush in 1993 and gave birth to quadruplets in 1995, gaining local celebrity as Quad Mom. She was rebuilding her life. She had a new husband, 4 healthy babies, and 2 daughters from her first marriage. She was moving forward. Blackthorne changed his name after a character in James Clavell's Shogun. He made a fortune selling medical devices through his company RS Medical. In July 1997, he voluntarily terminated his parental rights to Stevie and Daryl. Despite giving up his rights, his obsession with controlling Sheila never stopped. The Belush family moved to Sarasota, Florida, in September 1997, partly to escape Blackthorn's surveillance. Sheila told her sister something that proved chillingly prophetic. She said, "Promise me that if I am not here, you will find Anne Rule and have her write my story." Blackthorn hired a chain of intermediaries. Golfing buddy Danny Rocha recruited friend Sammy Gonzalez, who enlisted his cousin Jose Luis del Toro Jr., a 21-year-old recently released from jail. Blackthorn offered up to $54,000 for the job. On November 7, 1997, Del Toro broke into the Belush home through a window. After watching Sheila caring for her 23-month-old quadruplets for about an hour, he later confessed he almost did not go through with it. But when Sheila noticed him, he shot her in the face with a .45 caliber pistol, using a towel as a silencer which jammed the gun, and then used a kitchen knife on her. 13-year-old Stevie Belush found her mother when she returned from school. The quadruplets had been walking in their mother's blood for hours, leaving small footprints across the scene. 23-month-old Timmy told his father, "Mommy has got a boo-boo, and a man did it." A toddler, not even 2 years old, witnessed what happened and tried to tell his father in the only words he knew. A landscaper working in the neighborhood had memorized the license plate of Del Toro's car as it drove away. That one observant person cracked the case within 2 days. Del Toro was arrested in Monterrey, Mexico on November 18, 1997, just 11 days after the crime. The prosecution faced a challenge. Blackthorn lived in Texas. The crime occurred in Florida, and normal Texas law would have made it difficult to prosecute him as the mastermind. So they used the Federal Violence Against Women Act of 1994 to charge Blackthorn in federal court, bypassing state jurisdictional issues entirely. It was one of the first times the federal law was used this way. Danny Rocha was convicted of first-degree murder in January 1999 and sentenced to life. Del Toro pleaded guilty and received 2 consecutive life sentences. Sammy Gonzalez received 19 years in a plea deal and has since been released. Alan Blackthorn was convicted in federal court on July 6, 2000, of interstate conspiracy to commit murder for hire and sentenced to 2 concurrent life sentences plus a $250,000 fine. He died in prison on November 18, 2014, at age 59, exactly 17 years to the day after Del Toro was arrested in Mexico. Del Toro's latest motion to overturn his sentence was denied in November 2025. Sheila's sister kept her promise. Anne Rule wrote the book Every Breath You Take about the case. If you have made it this far and enjoy content like this, consider subscribing to the channel. We cover cases just like these every single week, and the remaining 5 are just as disturbing. But the next case did not involve a hired killer or an elaborate conspiracy. It involved 7 teenagers who decided to deal with a problem themselves. Bobby Kent. Bobby Kent, born May 12, 1973, was the son of Iranian immigrants in Hollywood, Florida. To adults, he appeared charming and handsome. To his peers, he was a nightmare. He was a steroid-using bodybuilder who terrorized everyone around him. His primary target was lifelong best friend Martin Puccio Jr., whom he beat regularly, once set his Doberman on, and threatened with a lead pipe when Puccio tried to end the friendship. Kent coerced Puccio into degrading situations and threatened to expose him if he tried to leave. He also physically harmed girlfriend Alice Willis and allegedly assaulted her the night before his death. Everyone in the group was afraid of him. Nobody felt like they could go to the police. Nobody felt like there was a way out. On the night of July 14th, 1993, 7 young people lured Kent to a remote rock pit near Weston, Florida, under the pretense of hanging out. Willis distracted Kent. Donald Semenek, 17, stabbed him in the back of the neck first. Kent fell and cried out to Puccio, "Marty, I am sorry. Please, whatever it is, I am sorry." He was apologizing. Even in that moment, he was apologizing to the friend he had spent years tormenting. Puccio responded by stabbing Kent in the stomach, then cutting his throat. Derek Kaufman, who called himself a hitman but had no prior connection to Kent, delivered the fatal blow with a baseball bat. The body was dumped in a canal. Lisa Connolly, Puccio's pregnant girlfriend and a primary instigator who had pushed hardest for the plan, stayed in the car the entire time. His best friend was begging him to stop, and instead of stopping, he finished it. The group fell apart within days. 7 teenagers could not keep a secret. Connolly confessed to her mother, who contacted family members with police connections. Derek Disvirko cooperated fully and led police to the body at the bottom of the canal. By July 20th, just 6 days later, all 7 were arrested. The entire conspiracy unraveled in less than a week. Every single one of them talked. There was no loyalty, no pact of silence. Just a group of young people who had done something they could not undo. And the weight of it crushed them almost immediately. Marty Puccio was sentenced to death, later reduced to life. The Florida Supreme Court vacated his death sentence in 1997, finding he played no greater a role than several co-perpetrators. His projected release date was reduced to July 2048 in February 2025. He will be 75 years old if he makes it to that date. Derek Kaufman received life plus 30 years and remains at Marion Correctional Institution. Donald Semenek received life and remains at Okeechobee Correctional. Lisa Connolly's life sentence was reduced to 22 years on appeal, and she was released in February 2004. She now lives in Pennsylvania. Alice Willis received 17 years plus 40 years probation and was released in September 2001. Derek Disvirko received 11 years and was released in October 1999. Heather Swallers received 7 years and was released in February 1998. Director Larry Clark's 2001 film Bully depicted the case, starring Brad Renfro, Nick Stahl, Rachel Miner, and Michael Pitt. Roger Ebert gave it 4 out of 4 stars, calling it a masterpiece on its own terms. The surviving participants said the film was reasonably accurate to what happened. Kent's parents, who had no idea their son was tormenting everyone around him, were devastated. To them, he was a good son. To everyone his age, he was a nightmare nobody could escape. What makes this case so difficult is that there were no adults who could see what was happening. Kent's parents saw a polite, charming young man. His peers saw something completely different. And when a group of teenagers decided the only way out was the worst possible option, 7 lives were destroyed in a single night. 1 person gone and 6 others sent to prison, some of them for the rest of their lives. But the next case involves a family on their first ever vacation, a stranger with a boat, and a sunset cruise they would never return from. The Rogers family. Joan Rogers, 36, and her daughters Michelle, 17, and Christ, 14, were dairy farmers from Wilshire, Ohio, on their first ever vacation. It was the first time any of them had ever left their home state. Joan wanted to give her girls something special. They saved up, drove south, and visited Orlando theme parks. On June 1st, 1989, they became lost on the return drive and decided to take an extra day in Tampa, checking into the Days Inn on Rocky Point. It was supposed to be one more fun day before heading home. Oba Chandler, born October 11, 1946, was a con man and career criminal with 20 juvenile arrests who had fathered an estimated 7 to 13 children with multiple women. He ran an unlicensed aluminum siding business and owned a blue and white boat called Gypsy One. He was also a police informant for the Tampa Police Department. Chandler encountered the Rogers family, likely at a gas station, and wrote them handwritten directions to their hotel. He was friendly. He was helpful. He also offered a sunset boat cruise on Tampa Bay, and they accepted. The last photograph ever taken by the family shows a sunset over Tampa Bay from their hotel balcony, taken just before they left to meet their killer. Ship-to-shore telephone records later placed Chandler's boat on the water in the early morning hours of June 2nd. On June 4th, 1989, all 3 bodies were found floating in Tampa Bay, hands tied behind their backs, duct tape on their faces, ropes with concrete blocks around their necks. Autopsies confirmed water in their lungs. They had been thrown in alive. Michelle had managed to free one hand in a final desperate struggle before drowning. She was 17 years old, and she fought until the very end. A mother and her 2 daughters on their first vacation, trusting a stranger who offered them a sunset cruise. And he threw them in the water with concrete blocks tied to their necks while they were still breathing. Their husband and father, Hal Rogers, was back home in Ohio, waiting for them to return. The case went cold for 3 years. Nobody knew who the man with the handwritten directions was. In an unprecedented 1992 move, 3 years after the bodies were found, police placed 5 billboards throughout Tampa Bay, displaying enlarged images of Chandler's handwriting from the brochure found in the Rogers car. Nobody had ever done this before. It was the first such use of billboards by U.S. law enforcement in a criminal investigation. The billboards read, "Who wrote this?" and showed the handwritten directions side by side with a phone number. Thousands of people drove past them every day. A former neighbor recognized Chandler's handwriting from a work contract he had written for an aluminum siding job and contacted police. Handwriting analysis and palm prints on the brochure matched Chandler. His own handwriting, the same handwriting he used to charm a family of tourists, put him on death row. He was arrested on September 24, 1992. The jury deliberated just 90 minutes before finding Chandler guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder on September 29, 1994. His conviction was upheld by the Florida Supreme Court. In February 2014, DNA posthumously linked Chandler to a 4th victim, 20-year-old Ivelisse Barrios Begurisa, who was strangled in Coral Springs in 1990. Even after his death, they were still finding his victims. During his 17 years on death row, Chandler never received a single visitor. Not one person came to see him in 17 years. He was executed by lethal injection on November 15, 2011, at age 65, leaving a handwritten note claiming innocence. Hal Rogers, who had remarried and transitioned from dairy farming to raising 5,000 pigs, watched from the front row, but the next case is one of the most difficult on this list to discuss. And the failures of the system that allowed it to happen led to a law that changed the country. Jessica Lunsford. Jessica Marie Lunsford, born October 6, 1995, was a 9-year-old third grader at Homosassa Elementary School in Citrus County, Florida. She lived with her father, Mark Lunsford, and paternal grandparents in a mobile home. She loved the color purple, sang karaoke, and slept with a flashlight because she was afraid of the dark. She was a happy, normal kid in a quiet rural community where everyone knew everyone. Or at least they thought they did. John Evander Cooey, born September 19, 1958, was a registered offender with 24 or more arrests over 30 years, including 2 prior offenses involving children. He had a crack cocaine addiction and an IQ of 78. He had failed to register his current address and was living unregistered with his half-sister's family in a trailer just 65 to 100 yards from the Lunsford home, close enough to see her front door from his window. A man with his record, living that close to a child, and nobody in the system knew he was there. At approximately 3 a.m. on February 24, 2005, Cooey entered the Lunsford home through an unlocked door, woke Jessica, told her he was taking her to her father, and took her back to his trailer. He held her captive for approximately 3 days, hiding her in his bedroom closet. The massive search that followed involved hundreds of volunteers and law enforcement from multiple agencies. Police dogs were brought in. The community mobilized. When the search intensified and police dogs neared the area, Cooey panicked. He bound her wrists with speaker wire, placed her inside 2 garbage bags along with her stuffed purple dolphin, and buried her alive in a shallow hole behind the trailer. She was still alive when he put her in the ground. During the initial door-to-door search, deputies visited the trailer, but Cooey's housemates lied about his presence. Officers failed to search the closet, where Jessica was likely still alive at that time. If they had looked in that closet, they would have found her. Cooey himself later said he wished they had, because they would have found her. Cooey was arrested on March 17, 2005, in Augusta, Georgia, after fleeing Florida. His videotaped confession was ruled inadmissible because he had asked for an attorney up to 7 times and was denied each time. Despite losing the confession, prosecutors still secured a conviction using DNA evidence found on a blood-stained mattress, fingerprints from the closet where Jessica was hidden, and later jailhouse statements Cooey made to other inmates. On March 7, 2007, Cooey was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to death, plus 3 life sentences. Cooey died of cancer on September 30, 2009, at age 51, before his execution could be carried out. He never faced the needle. He died of natural causes in a hospital bed. The Jessica Lunsford Act, signed by Governor Jeb Bush on April 19, 2005, just weeks after Jessica's body was found, mandated a 25-year minimum sentence for offenses against children under 12, lifetime GPS monitoring upon release, and stricter registration requirements. Before this law, offenders could serve short sentences and vanish into communities without anyone tracking them. That is exactly what Cooey had done. Over 42 states adopted similar legislation in the years that followed. One 9-year-old girl from Citrus County, Florida, changed the law across most of the country. Her name is now attached to protections that have kept track of thousands of offenders who might otherwise have disappeared from the system, the way Cooey did. Mark Lunsford became one of America's most prominent child safety advocates. He traveled the country pushing for tougher registration laws and spoke before state legislatures. He remained active through the 20th Anniversary of Jessica's disappearance in February 2025. 20 years later, still fighting to make sure what happened to his daughter never happens to anyone else's child. But the next case takes us back to 1978, to a sorority house in Tallahassee, and the night one of America's most notorious serial killers struck for the final time. The Chi Omega case. Ted Bundy, born Theodore Robert Cowell, November 24, 1946, confessed to 30 killings across 7 states. After escaping from a Colorado jail on December 30, 1977, he fled to Tallahassee, Florida, renting a room near the FSU campus under the alias Chris Hagen on January 8, 1978. In the early morning hours of January 15, 1978, Bundy entered the Chi Omega sorority house at 661 West Jefferson Street through a back door with a faulty lock, carrying a piece of oak firewood he had taken from a pile outside. In approximately 15 minutes, within earshot of over 30 sleeping women, he attacked 4 of them. 15 minutes. That is all it took. Margaret Bowman, 21, was bludgeoned and garroted with a nylon stocking. She died in her bed without ever waking up. Lisa Levy, 20, was beaten, strangled, and bitten deeply on her left buttock. That bite mark would become the most crucial forensic evidence in the case, and one of the most famous pieces of evidence in criminal history. She was pronounced dead at Tallahassee Memorial Hospital. Kathy Kleiner survived with a broken jaw and deep lacerations. Karen Chandler survived with a concussion, broken jaw, lost teeth, and a crushed finger. She later said that pretty much every bone in her face had been broken. Chi Omega resident Nita Neary, returning from a date around 3 a.m., saw Bundy fleeing through the front door with a club in his hand. She saw his profile clearly enough to later identify him. Within the hour, Bundy traveled several blocks and attacked Cheryl Thomas, 21, in her apartment, fracturing her skull in 5 places and causing permanent deafness that ended her dance career. 3 weeks later, on February 9, 1978, Bundy abducted and took the life of 12-year-old Kimberly Leach from her Lake City school. He was captured on February 15th in Pensacola after a traffic stop. 15 minutes. 4 women attacked, 2 of them gone forever, and 30 other women sleeping just rooms away heard nothing. The 1979 Miami trial was the first criminal trial nationally televised in American history, covered by 250 reporters from 5 continents. The prosecution's centerpiece was the bite mark on Lisa Levy. Forensic odontologist Dr. Richard Souveron identified 15 matching points between Bundy's distinctive dental pattern and the impression. Bundy insisted on handling much of his own defense. He had rejected a 75-year plea deal because he could not bring himself to publicly admit guilt. He was found guilty and sentenced to death. A second death sentence followed for the abduction and murder of 12-year-old Kimberly Leach from her Lake City school on February 9, 1978. During the Leach trial, Bundy married Carol Ann Boone in the courtroom. Exploiting a Florida law making courtroom declarations of marriage legally binding. After 10 years on death row, Bundy frantically confessed to approximately 30 cases in his final days, attempting a bonus for time trade. He would reveal locations of remains in exchange for more time. The deal failed. He gave a final interview to James Dobson on January 23, 1989, blaming pornography for his crimes. He was executed in the electric chair on January 24, 1989, at age 42. A crowd of over 500 people celebrated outside Florida State Prison, chanting "Burn Bundy, burn." Vendors sold t-shirts. People brought grills and cooked food. It was the closest thing to a party a prison execution has ever seen. Survivor Kathy Kleiner Rubin, who now lives in New Orleans, has spoken publicly about the attack for decades. She has dedicated her life to making sure the victims are remembered as people, not just as names in a Bundy documentary. Cheryl Thomas earned a master's degree from Gallaudet University and pivoted to teaching ballet to hearing-impaired students, turning the deafness Bundy caused into a career helping others. Karen Chandler Pryor returned to live in the Chi Omega house after the attacks, finished her degree at FSU, and now lives in Arizona with grandchildren. But the final case on our list happened the day after Christmas, in a quiet neighborhood near Fort Myers, and it was solved because of a 2-year-old boy who accidentally dialed 911. Stephen and Michelle Andrews. Stephen and Michelle Andrews, both 28, were a married couple from Minnesota who moved to the Gateway community near Fort Myers, Florida, in August 2004. Stephen was a landscape architect at Outside Productions. Michelle was a nutritionist at Manor Care Health Services. They had a nearly 3-year-old son, Lucas. They were building a life in Florida. New jobs, new home, a toddler running around the house. But the marriage was in trouble. After Michelle had a brief extramarital affair before the move to Florida, Stephen began his own affair with co-worker Kelly Ballou, 26, who happened to be the longtime girlfriend of Fred DeWitt Cooper Jr., 27, a motorcycle mechanic from Bonita Springs. 2 affairs, 4 people, and a web of jealousy that would end in the worst possible way. In December 2005, Ballou tried to end her 6-year relationship with Cooper. He was devastated. He grabbed a gun at one point and threatened to take his own life. He was not handling it. He was spiraling. He could not accept that Ballou was leaving him for another man. On the night of December 26, 2005, the day after Christmas, while Ballou was secretly meeting Stephen at their office, Cooper rode his motorcycle through the dark Florida streets to the Andrews Gateway home. He knew the address. He had been watching. He broke in through a window and took both parents' lives in their bedroom while their toddlers slept in the next room. Stephen was shot in the head. Michelle was beaten and suffocated. Cooper then left the house, got back on his motorcycle, and rode home. Their son Lucas slept through everything. He woke up alone the next morning in a house with 2 dead parents and a floor full of Christmas presents. Their 2-year-old son, Lucas, inadvertently triggered a 911 call the next morning. Dispatchers heard rustling and a toddler crying "Mama." Deputies arrived and found Lucas wandering, the house covered in blood amid opened Christmas presents. The day after Christmas, a little boy walking through a house full of presents, covered in blood, crying for his mother. That image stayed with every officer who responded to the scene. Neighbors reported hearing a loud motorcycle in the middle of the night. Surveillance footage from a nearby convenience store captured the rider heading toward the Andrews home and then returning in the direction he came from. A co-worker at Cooper's motorcycle shop reported that on December 28th, 2 days after the crime, Cooper spent over an hour furiously scrubbing a camouflage hoodie at work. He was so focused on cleaning it that other employees noticed. DNA testing matched Cooper's DNA to material found under Michelle's fingernails. She had fought back. She scratched him hard enough to take his DNA with her. Cooper's first trial in October 2008 ended in a hung jury after he testified that his DNA under Michelle's nails came from a consensual encounter, claiming he and Michelle had been consoling each other over their partner's affair. He looked the jury in the eye and said the DNA. NA got there because they were intimate. At the second trial in St. Petersburg in early 2009, Cooper changed key details in his story. He contradicted himself on timelines, locations, and specifics. His own testimony destroyed his credibility. On March 3, 2009, he was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder and armed burglary. Judge Thomas Reese sentenced him to 2 consecutive life sentences plus 25 years, stating it was the intention of the court that he never again be able to look at the light of day, except through steel bars and barbed wire. Cooper's conviction was upheld on appeal. He remains in Florida State Prison with no possibility of parole. He will die behind those bars. Lucas was raised by his grandparents, the only family he had left. He was too young to remember his parents. The case was featured on Oxygen's Homicide for the holidays in 2019. This was all from our side today. Thanks for watching. Click here to check out another video.